All right, I will say hello and welcome back to another episode of The Balance Breakdown. And today I am joined by the general cohort. We have Sean McGuinness sporting actually a fabulous beard. I'm not going to lie. It's beautiful. I think you've done really well.
I'm a big fan.
I am a big fan. It makes
what
you
you're
look
looking
like an
at,
English writer.
Oh, thank you. What you're looking at is 2 weeks of focus and dedication have created this beard. So thank you very much.
And we're also joined by a special guest this week. We are joined by John Lineker's head coach, Mr. Jack Spear. Jack, how's it going?
Thank you very much, mate. Yes, obviously, my life is now complete. John is my friend. We've been WhatsApping, we've been training, all of the good stuff. He even took me out for lunch. So yeah, I'm on cloud 9.
So we're here to talk about UFC 257, McGregor versus Poirier 2. Oh, it's Poirier versus McGregor, I guess. But before we do that, we will dive into a little bit about Brazil. Jack, you obviously spent a month in Brazil very recently. Do you want to tell us? I mean, first of all, let's talk about Damian Maia. Fuck John Lineker. Let's talk about Damian Maia.
Damian Maia, you'll be pleased to know he's as nice of a guy as you'd expect, right? Like he was really, really friendly. We had the first time I met him, he wasn't actually teaching, but he was there kind of like supervising the classes and whatnot. And really, really nice guy. Sat there and chatted with me for like 10, 15 minutes. Very, very good teacher as well. So he was teaching primarily in Portuguese, but then he would translate at the end for me. Was quite flexible as well with kind of what we were learning. He was asking me about my game and stuff. And just, even there was the one, I think the second session I took with him, I got caught in the Sao Paulo traffic and arrived pretty late, but he came down, let me in and stuff. He was super nice. So yeah, everything you think Damian Maia is, I can assure you he is.
You didn't get to roll with him though, right?
No. He was only teaching. I didn't see him rolling with anyone, but probably for the best, to be honest, as well. I think he'd probably smash my little guard to bits.
Yeah, that would have been a shame. So go on, tell us about John Lineker. You know,
Easily,
just before you start, afterwards, I think he mentioned the podcast in an Instagram post, or you mentioned the podcast in an Instagram post or whatever, and he DM'd me on the Instagram account, and oh my God, it was amazing. Best moment of my life so far.
What a moment.
I know, amazing.
What did he say?
Hold on, I'll just check on my phone, but as I'm checking, you tell me.
So I met with him. I did some positional sparring. He's probably going to fight Bibiano Fernandez next for the One Championship belt. So his coach had me doing some positional sparring and some general rolling as well. As you would imagine, a very dense guy,
thick with 3 C's.
Yeah, it wasn't the fastest round. He was just incredibly dense, very hard to get under and move and whatnot, and pretty brutal grips as well. But yeah, decent rounds. He took me out for lunch afterwards as well. Gave me a little drive around his town. It was a really pleasant day. It was good.
Beautiful.
Bucket list stuff.
Did you let him hit you with a body shot?
Look, I really wanted him to be like, look, we're going to do some light striking sparring, and then I would have sacrificed my ribs to the violence gods. Yeah, I think that'd be a sure way into martial arts heaven. But anyway, it wasn't to be. He wasn't doing any striking. Unfortunately, I arrived on a grappling day, so my ribs were spared.
That's a real shame, actually. That's a real. Me and Sean were betting on how many ribs you'd come back without, how many you'd have to leave in Brazil, and frankly, both of us lost. So, yeah, I mean, that's shit. But anyway, we will move on. First of all, before we start the fights, I just wanted to get your feel on what it's like. I mean, we've been without fights for a little while now, right? And obviously, at the time we're recording, this is just before Calvin Kattar and Max Holloway, so obviously it's good to have some fights back. But do you feel like it's the dawn of a Conor McGregor fight? Does it feel like a big fight week coming up? Does it feel like that?
Not really. I'm not sure if that's a consequence of lockdown. I'm not sure if that's a consequence of us coming off the back of Christmas and New Year's. But I'll admit, for a Conor fight, this is pretty tame in terms of the build-up.
Sean?
Yeah, it's very weird. There's you can see there's a little bit, there's some breakdowns out a little bit earlier on YouTube than normal. But even the fact that I think it's bizarre that Conor's going to be fighting and there's going to be barely any crowd there. I think they were talking about a small crowd at one point.
There will be a small crowd there.
Yeah, but especially for a Conor fight, that's going to be so surreal and strange.
You know what? I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. Now, this is going to be, I'm leaking the first line of my article, but the first line of my article is going to be something along the lines of, we feasted quite greedily on Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje and the sound of those shots landing. And it's something that we've kind of come to revere, is the sound of strikes landing in the octagon. You put Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor in an octagon, and we're going to hear some shit, son. Like, I cannot wait for that. But I mean, obviously there will be a small crowd, but it's not going to be your typical UFC crowd, right? Like, these are highly established people and whatever. So I can't imagine you're just going to get Sean's favorite Just Bleed guy in the corner. But you're likely to see something, right? And I think it's going to be mental to see. Because we've already seen Dustin walk out to an empty room, right? When he fought Dan Hooker. And now we get to see Conor walk out to literally the antithesis of what Conor has walked out for the last number of years, right? Even when he was on Cage Warriors shows, the Cage Warriors shows in the Dell in Ireland was packed to the rafters, and there's like history behind it and whatever. And yeah, just as an aside, as like an auxiliary point to this whole fight, I am so excited to see what happens when they close that door in an essentially empty arena. I cannot fucking wait. But on the topic of that, we will dive right in. So this is obviously a rematch. This time I know it's a rematch. You can't get me on that one. I went back and watched the first fight, and it's astounding to me, frankly, how much of a different fighter Dustin Poirier is, and how much of a different fighter Conor is in some aspects, but very, very similar in other ways. I'm going to chuck it over to you to begin with, Sean, and then we'll all feed our piece. So do you want to give us your initial thoughts on McGregor and Poirier?
Yeah, well, it's exactly what you're saying. I went back and watched the first fight the other day, and they both changed so much. I suppose especially Poirier, first of all, but he's changed more. He's added a lot of things into his game, like especially, I know we were talking about in the initial thoughts about his new boxing defense and that sort of Philly shell and that really high shoulder roll. And it's interesting because when he moved up to the lightweight division and got knocked out by Michael Johnson, he was the type of guy who I just didn't think I could back him in any fight anymore to be consistent. Whereas, fast forward to now, and I'd probably back him in a 5-round war against any top lightweight. With that said, Conor's changed quite a lot as well, but I think he's almost done it the opposite way, rather than add a load of things into his style. He's trimmed the fat, he's got rid of a lot of the excess stuff that was giving him trouble, the type of thing that Robin Black used to call the Conor McGregor flim flam back in the day. And that's one thing when you watch his fight against Poirier, it's back in the time where Conor's like winging out all these spinning wheel kicks with like sort of no rhyme or reason behind them and stuff like that. And I think that he's really dialed it back in a way where I know this is going to be the debate, but I think he has refined his style quite a bit. He's got just enough to insulate that left hand, but I think that refinement's going to be key because at the end of the day, they're both pretty much fight with the same principles as fighters. Like Poirier is a slow starter that snowballs pretty dramatically. But Conor needs to get you out of there early and be, very sort of energy efficient.
So I think you've touched on one of the really, really big points in this fight, but I will hand over to Jack just for fairness, and I hope he doesn't make my point for me. And Jack, feel free. What do you think about this fight?
So I think it's great timing for the rematch. I'm looking forward to seeing Dustin's game plan here. I think that's the real key thing for me. There's never a surprise about what Conor wants to do. Whereas I think Dustin is a lot more versatile, and I think there might be easier paths to victory than just trying to prove he's improved his striking since their first fight, right? What this comes down to me is I just can't trust Dustin's decision making. I think we saw it a little bit in the Khabib fight, right? He shouldn't have been shooting for those guillotines.
How dare you? Hashtag jump the gilly.
Always jump the gilly, except for when you're fighting a Dagestani.
Yeah, okay, fine. And
instead of exploring what is potentially an easier path to victory, I do think Dustin's going to test his striking. And from the looks of it, Conor seems focused. He's been hungry. He's been chasing down a fight for some time, and yeah, I'm still leaning a Conor repeat in the rematch.
Okay, you didn't make my point. Phenomenal. So I think the points here. So I went back and I watched a number of fights. I'm just going to give you a highlight of the notes that I made, just because it's easier to frame my thoughts. At 155, Dustin Poirier is about as tough of a man as you're going to find, right? But what I've found against the high-level guys, so this is Hooker, Holloway, Gaethje, Alvarez. How did he win those fights? He just outwars people, right? He drags them into a dogfight and he makes it a war, and that's how he wins. Now, don't get me wrong. I agree with Sean totally about the Philly shell defensive head movement, about the beautiful striking fundamentals that he's got and some really advanced boxing techniques. But if we look at round 2 against Dan Hooker, for the last 17 seconds of that fight, Dustin had his back against the fence. His chin was tucked and he was just winging leather, right? And for a lot of that round, it was highly skilled war, but it was a war of attrition, right? And you look at Alvarez, same thing happened. You look at Holloway, okay, he put a beating on Holloway, but Holloway gave just as much back, right? I feel like when Poirier gets to the highest levels, he needs to make it a war to win. And I think Conor will have learned from the first and the second Diaz fights that he can't compete in a war, right? Unless there's been a radical change in his cardio output, he doesn't compete well in wars. We've seen this. So I think I agree with both of you. Sean touched on it earlier, that we're a really weird style matchup where either Conor is going to do what he says he does and get him out there in 60 seconds, or if this goes to round 4 and 5, I favor Dustin way, way heavier, right? What do you think of that?
Yeah, just to build on what you were saying about, his sort of last opponents, I agree with you that a lot of the time he is winning wars of attrition, but he's also against opponents that are known for engaging people in wars of attrition. You know, when you think of Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Dan Hooker to an extent, like they are the extremes in people that are going to meet you toe to toe and brawl with you. And even some of the things that Poirier's been saying in like the interviews in the lead up about, I want us both to be covered in blood and to find out who's going to quit first. Conor McGregor is the opposite type of fighter.
Exactly.
He'll talk a big game, but there is no chance, I think, in the world that Conor is going in with the mentality of, I want to be covered in blood. He's going to snipe you from the distance. It's the difference between someone being a marksman and someone being a brawler. And Poirier has done amazingly well fighting very good brawlers, but I just think Conor is such a different style matchup, to a lot of those guys.
I agree. I mean, what I've got here is this is the last line of my notes for the Dan Hooker fight. Poirier is just so fucking tough. But in round 2, this is absolute damage central. The big swings at the end of round 2 will get you knocked the fuck out by someone like Conor McGregor. But I mean, I feel like that's true. Like, what's Conor's signature setup for that left hand? He throws a jab, he gets a return, he slips out just in time, heads back, spine's ready, and he bangs that left hand in. Man, I feel like Dustin's there for that all day long. I really do. And the Philly shell is cool, but that Philly shell opens up Conor McGregor's left high kick, which is, as we've seen, phenomenal, right? Ask fucking Donald Cerrone. I just feel like this is a terrible styles matchup for Dustin Poirier, just as terrible as it was back then. Now, personally, I'm not so sure that I think Conor to an extent has definitely refined his game, but we have certainly lost some serious Conor McGregor evolution with all of the stuff that's happened outside of the octagon, right? Do we see Conor McGregor anywhere near what we saw against Eddie Alvarez? Who knows? I don't even think that guy exists anymore. Frankly, I just don't think it exists. But I do think that this is a tough night for Dustin inside these first 3 rounds. Jack?
I'm on board with you. I actually think probably just the first round or 2. I think if Dustin was able to drag it on into 3, 4, and 5, I would be massively confident that he was going to win, just because of how we've seen Conor tend to fade in the past. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty much a repeat of their first fight. I think Poirier is probably going to be a little bit too confident in his improvements, and like you just described there, Harry, I think he's probably going to fall into the trap.
I just want to argue your point a little bit. Is you mentioned there's different ways for Poirier to win, right? And obviously alluding maybe to the grappling. Like, I went back and I specifically went back to watch McGregor's grappling, right? And one of the greatest examples of that was the Holloway fight. So he blows out his ACL in the second round, right? And he still manages to get beautiful takedowns. He turns the corner so well on some of those pickups from the fence. And his guard passing was nice. His weight distribution, his base is really nice. Again, when he was, I can't remember exactly who it was against. It was one of his early fights. Oh, Jesus, this is going to not. It might have been Brandao. I can't remember. But he is backed up against the fence. Somebody manages to take him down, as in they pick him off the floor and they're turning him away from the fence and he reverses it in midair and lands upon top.
Yeah, it's Brandao.
It is Brandao, right?
Drop,
yeah, it's a lateral drop and it's fucking beautiful.
So nice.
And you're like, okay, so this is, I mean, okay, Brandao is not Dustin Poirier, but this was what? Coming up for 8 years ago, right? His grappling is almost certainly going to have improved, right? And I think, of course, Dustin Poirier, legitimate black belt, whatever, but I feel like Conor's grappling is so underrated just because of how good his striking is. And I think Dustin's going to have a really hard time of taking him down if he does try and engage that, you know?
Yeah,
I
think...
you, yeah.
Sorry, go on,
sure.
Jack.
Jump in.
I was just going to say, I agree over Conor's grappling. I think it's a pretty interesting talking point
because you're a fucking shill.
I am definitely Sean McGuinness. I'm obviously going to be a shill for Conor McGregor, but you know, I've always thought that Conor was almost a victim of his own success because he sort of flew through the featherweight ranks so quickly. He went from grappling Max Holloway to someone like Chad Mendes, who's a D1 wrestler. And I feel like if he'd gone a more gradual route, we would have seen that he's a very legitimate grappler. Like, this is a really random example, but imagine if Yair Rodriguez hadn't gone through that bottom layer of people and everyone was saying, oh my God, he's absolutely incredible off his back. And then, you know, met Frankie Edgar and just ran into a brick wall. And I feel like Conor's had a similar thing. Really?
Yeah, I watched
that fight. Which one? The Frankie Edgar one?
Yeah.
That must have been sad.
I've never felt, honestly, the whole crowd, there was loads of Frankie Edgar fans in there. The whole crowd was silent. The whole crowd. It was really, really sad.
You wanted that scissor kick, didn't you? Mate, you came for the scissor kick.
You know what? I was high on Yair, obviously. But when I saw him getting taken down so easily in the first round, and I was like, oh no, this is done. Like, this is so done. But your point about Chad Mendes, I think, is really important. And it's that Chad obviously managed to take Conor down. He had a knee injury again just before that camp. And Conor did what? He worked his way back to his feet, right? And Chad Mendes, as we know, is no joke when it comes to grappling. And I just think
and to go from that to Khabib as well, like, it's quite difficult measuring sticks to use as to where his grappling is, you know? So I think it's an interesting argument.
But I think we should just touch on Dustin a little bit more, because this tends to happen, right? Conor fights and then it doesn't matter who his opponent is. All we talk about is Conor. Like, my main worry here for Dustin is, does his chin hold up? And I don't mean that just because he's fighting Conor. I mean the wars that we've just mentioned. Dan Hooker, 5 rounds. Eddie Alvarez won 5 rounds, 1 disqualification. I think it was the third or the fourth. Holloway, 5 rounds. Gaethje, 5 rounds. Pettis, 3 rounds, whatever it was. All absolute fucking wars, right? He's been finished previously in his career. At one point, that chin is going to give up, you know? And I struggle to see it not being this fight. But what he does have, as we've already mentioned, is some of the best boxing fundamentals in that division, right? Not named Max Holloway when he moved up, but we saw what happened to Max Holloway when he moved up, right? He got an absolute blamming. Right? Certified whacking, as Jack would say, right? An absolute certified whacking. And, like, could you name me somebody, not named Conor McGregor, that has boxing fundamental skills like Dustin Poirier in the 155 division?
I reckon Gaethje's the closest with vision.
Way.
Maybe I think if you're going for the vision argument, and you're going about how much Gaethje's progressed, I'd say he's close, but I'd agree with you. Poirier probably is the best boxer.
And the thing that I saw that was really interesting in his first fight against McGregor that I actually think was a problem is he opened the fight by throwing really hard outside leg and inside body kicks. And what happened is he got checked immediately by that left hand and by his check hook, McGregor's check hook. And he sort of dialed that back a little bit, but then we saw it a little bit with Dan Hooker. You know, he would throw and then he'd catch Dan's kicks when Dan tried to reverse and whatever. Like, there is a route to victory for him. And I want to, you know, speak on that a little. I think if McGregor does open with those teeps and they're in range to be caught, Dustin's very good at catching a kick and utilizing that to initiate some grappling. But other than that, I mean, what's Dustin's route to victory, Jack?
Yeah, I think the only way he would have an advantage in the grappling, and I agree with you guys' points. I do think overall kind of Conor's grappling and anti-grappling, shall we say, is underrated. I think we saw a little snippet in the Nate Diaz fight too, where he was able to sweep him with an X guard. So he definitely understands what he's doing, and I think he's got very, very good form, especially when it comes to his wrestling as well. I just think even a strategy whereby you're trying to tie Conor up in every exchange, even if you're shooting, you may not be successful. I think it's more of the idea of wearing him down and getting the fight to the point of it being a war than it is necessarily just hitting a clean double leg and progressing to a submission.
Yeah, I think and I will make this final point before I hand over to Sean. Like, although he got a certified whacking, the first round against Khabib is some of the best. It's one of the rounds that we've seen somebody take the least amount of damage when they get put in the perfect position that Khabib wants you, stacked up against the fence, your legs together, he's got you triangled, and Conor did really well with his use of overhooks, bicep control, wrist control to stop the amalgamation of damage. Now, okay, the rest of the fight is what it is, right? But we saw somebody with the dominance and the grappling level of Khabib Nurmagomedov. If you're able to nullify 75% of it, you've done a pretty fucking good job, especially when you're dry as well,
agreed.
You know? Sean?
Yeah, definitely. And just to build off what you and Jack have been saying about Poirier's chances, I agree with Jack. I think that if it gets past the second round, I think Poirier's chances go up pretty exponentially. One of the things that really struck me in the Dan Hooker fight was not just the pace that he kept up, but how much his volume ramps up round by round. Like, I felt like Dan Hooker could keep up with him rounds 1 and 2. And then it was just amazing that, you know, in those final rounds, Dustin Poirier, he was not only keeping up the same pace, but his volume was increasing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that McGregor would be able to stand up to that sort of onslaught.
I agree. I think we'll move to picks, right? Unless anyone's got any further points you want to make. All right, Jack, give us the first pick, please.
I'm going Conor via knockout in round 1.
Jesus. Sean?
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah, they both changed a lot, but I think, the principles behind both are fighting is the same. You've got a very fast starter against someone that's a slower starter. I think Conor McGregor finishes it in round 1 as well.
So I'm going to give Dustin a little bit more than you guys have.
The votes are in.
I'm gonna take Conor McGregor by a knockout in the second round. The reason why I think that, predominantly in a few bullet points, is I do think Dustin's chin at 155 is way better than at 145. We've seen him take a lot of punishment. I don't think anyone has the accuracy of McGregor, and I think that chin will wear down very quickly. I suspect, you remember how Alvarez got finished? He was basically finished twice in rounds 1 and 2, and then in 3 he came out and actually finished it. I can see something similar like that happening. You know, Dustin takes the end of the second round, the end of the first round, he's wobbled, and then the second round he'll finish it early. But I just think the footwork's just too good, man. You know, even watching Conor in Cage Warriors, the footwork is just so unbelievable. His angles are incredible. His evasive maneuvers are just insane. So yeah, I'll take Conor McGregor second round KO. Okay, so we'll move on, and we will move on to. Man, this is an incredible fight. We'll move on to Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler. Sean, this was your fight. Do you want to take us away?
Yeah, I think this is a really good fight. I think it's a pretty classic move by the UFC in terms of how they treat a Bellator fighter moving over to the organization. I'm very much of the opinion that the UFC doesn't like Bellator champions coming in and getting big wins. So what they'll usually do.
Shocked.
You look outraged.
I am shocked at your opinions.
Well, I'm sorry, but this is what I think the harsh reality is. And
Jesus.
I think that they've kind of done that to Chandler and Dan Hooker. They'll usually give them someone that's just out of the top 5, isn't a massive name to the sort of casuals, but someone that is, you know, nevertheless a pretty bad matchup. And I think, in my eyes, that's what Dan Hooker is to Michael Chandler. I think stylistically, first of all, it's interesting because Chandler was interviewed recently about exactly how he would game plan to Dan Hooker, and he actually went into a surprising amount of detail. He was talking a lot about how dangerous Dan Hooker is on the feet and how wrestling for Michael Chandler was going to be a big part of the game plan, which, to be fair, I think is good thinking, because I don't think that Dan Hooker is not only a more diverse striker than Chandler, but I also think Dan Hooker is really good at fighting smaller opponents. Like, I actually think the danger level with him goes up quite a bit when he's against short, stocky opponents. Like, that flying spear knee that he has through the middle is always the first danger in my mind whenever he's going against a shorter guy. But in terms of the wrestling, though, because on the feet, I really don't see Chandler giving him many problems. You know, I think he's got more of a sort of rudimentary. He's got a big right hand, but outside of that, I don't think he really has the sort of diversity and sort of striking IQ.
Boxer. Let's be honest.
Yeah, he's kind of like a modern Sean Shirk. That's where I think about
Jesus,
Michael
that's so
Chandler.
rude.
That's
so rude.
Sean Shirk was great. What are you talking about? He was great.
Oh my God.
I didn't think that was disrespectful.
That's so disgusting.
Oh, for goodness sake. Anyway, so Michael Chandler's not as good a striker, but I think the wrestling is going to be a hard route as well. One fight I think that is a good indicator of how this is going to go is Dan Hooker versus Iaquinta. I think Iaquinta, short, stocky guy, came in for a lot of takedowns, and Dan Hooker's just so good at sitting in the corner when he's defending his takedowns and then landing really damaging strikes. You know, he'll really punish you if you mess up your shot on him. So yeah, I'm leaning quite heavily, as you can understand, towards Dan Hooker in this one.
Jack?
I think Sean's nailed this one. I think Hooker's been built and has a lot of kind of anti-takedown weapons, right? We should also, if we're talking about his big knee through the middle, we should probably also mention his front headlock as well. It's come along kind of leaps and bounds over the years, and he really puts his kind of gangly frame to use. Yeah, I've kind of got the same feel as Sean on this one. I feel like Chandler will know quite early on that he doesn't really have much for Hooker on the feet. He will then look to wrestle, and then it's just going to be a case of whether or not he can land those takedowns before getting caught on the way in. And yeah, I'm leaning at the moment towards Dan Hooker.
So I agree with all of you. I think the only thing that I will point out is Michael Chandler is only 5'8". Dan Hooker is 6'1". Michael Chandler is 34 years of age, making his MMA debut in 2009.
Jeez.
Right? So 34 years of age, been in this game 12 years, right? Dan Hooker has only just turned 30, and he made his MMA debut. Well, he was kickboxing for a long, long time, right? That was in 2009. But he started MMA really in 2012, right? So not too much of a difference, but I think the mileage on Chandler or on Sean Shirk's younger brother is just drastically different. I think my only thing I will point is Chandler trains with Eric Del Fierro, right? Who is an excellent game planner, right? So if anyone's going to give you a game plan to beat somebody of the technical skills of Dan Hooker, it's going to be somebody like Eric Del Fierro. But I think what's really interesting to me about this fight is less the two guys in the octagon, but it's actually the coaches, because I think Eugene Behrman is probably the best game planner in MMA right now, right? Or at least one of them. And then you've got Eric Del Fierro, who's like the old and tried guard. But I agree with both of you. I don't really have anything to say. I think Jack summed it up really nicely for Sean dribbling on as he does. And that's that. Look, it's going to be very difficult for Chandler to do anything on the feet. I think that Dan's too long, too seasoned, and that kickboxing is just too sharp. And then when it comes to the wrestling, he's a hard motherfucker to take down. And I think Sean makes a really good point that, as with all people, if you shoot a double leg against a really good kickboxer, Muay Thai fighter, that knee is coming and you best be prepared for it. So yeah, let's move for picks. Sean?
I'm going to go with Dan Hooker winning by TKO in round 2. And I only give it the second round because Michael Chandler's unbelievably tough. But yeah.
Okay, so a lot of hatred for Sean's shirt. Jack?
Same result in that I think Dan Hooker's going to win by KO. Tricky picking around on this one. I'm going to go round 1 as well. I'm going to go for the brutal, sudden, shocking finish.
Okay, I think Chandler's going to last the distance, and I think it's going to be a Dan Hooker unanimous decision. But I would not be shocked if Chandler pulls guard immediately, Dan Hooker snaps an Achilles kick, Chandler then gets up, falls back down, and the fight's over. That's it. It's done. Yeah. All right. After that bombshell, we'll move on. We will move on to the next fight, which happens to be... I have no idea why this fight is so high up the card, but we are where we are. Jessica Rai versus Joanne Calderwood. So this was my fight to research, so I'll talk a little bit about this. So, I mean, I think this sums it up, really. My first line of my notes are Joanne Calderwood is about as up and down a fighter as you're going to get. She comes in sometimes against Ariane Lipski, for instance. Ariane Lipski was all this hype coming from KSW, Queen of Violence, all this stuff, and Joanne Calderwood just beat the brakes off her, right? Against Andrea Lee, I know that was a split decision, but the thing that I noticed the most about Andrea Lee, and I'll go into this in a little bit more detail, but Andrea Lee gave Calderwood opportunities to strike. And my overall presumption for Calderwood is it feels like if Jojo can have a fight on either of these two terms, either really far out on a really far away MMA range or really close in almost a clinch situation, that's where she thrives. But anywhere in between those two terms is where she struggles really badly. My example for that is Jennifer Maia, right? Jennifer Maia didn't bother staying at kickboxing range, and she didn't want to clinch necessarily, but she stood in that mid-range where she was always able to hit Jojo and was always ready to overwhelm her with things. Now, we know what happened. Jojo catches a kick, gets a takedown, and then decides to give Jiu-Jitsu black belt all the space in the world and an arm for some reason. And, you know, these things happen in MMA. But we then look at Andrea Lee, for instance, and Jojo is able to get her takedown. She's able to strike in her range. She's able to do the damage that she should do. Jessica Rai, Jesus Christ, like this was painful to watch. I'm not going to lie to you. Like I forgot how bad Jessica Rai's looked in recent fights. Really, really bad. I watched her against Cynthia Calvillo as my main bit of research, and man, it was like watching a 50-year-old fight a 15-year-old. It was, you know, Cynthia Calvillo could throw 2 shots and get back out by the time I had even realized she'd been hit. Like, it's bad. It's really bad. And my problem with Ai predominantly is that she stands in this really strange stance where it's almost, she's low as if she wants to plant her feet and land shots, but then she doesn't throw anything to be able to land any shots. So it's very much a nothingness. It's a little bit like a Holly Holm where she throws lows but doesn't land anything. But it's going to be a tough fight for Jessica Rai, let me tell you. That's my prediction. Jack?
Yeah, I've never been the biggest Jessica Rai fan. I'm not sure if she does have an army of fans there, but
sorry, we'll get to misogynist Sean in a second, so you can keep those opinions to yourself.
Thank you very much. But yeah, she has looked very flat of late, especially that Cynthia Calvillo fight. I think Joanne Calderwood can be very inconsistent and
Yep.
can definitely have her off night, right? But I think generally she is a much more consistent performer than I, and she fights at a higher level. I think she has far more tools on the feet. I think as long as she can control her range and avoid kind of minimize the amount of times I kind of burst forwards with those punching combinations, I think she's going to comfortably outpoint her and win a decision.
Yeah, my problem with Ai and those punching combinations is they're literally just in a straight line, right? There's no circling off. There's no cage control. There's no cage cutting. None of that. It's just straight up and down. And Jojo has a little bit more about her than that, right? Misogynist Sean, do you want to give us your opinion?
I actually disagree with both of you. I think that Jessica Rai is probably going to take this. Yeah, the fight shouldn't be happening. That's not what I think. But Yeah, I think that Jessica Eye is actually probably going to take this, to be honest. I think that I think you're absolutely right, Harry, about Joanne Calderwood has a real vulnerability. Either she has to be right in the clinch where she can land those knees and elbows, or she has to be all the way out. And anything in between, she has a lot of trouble. Like you were saying, when she was against Jennifer Maia, I feel like she was losing on the feet before she got, hit with the classic armbar off my back sort of thing. But
it wouldn't be off your back, would it?
No, it definitely wouldn't. But yeah, I think that Jessica Eye actually strikes very similarly to, not as well, but I think she strikes with the same style as Jennifer Maia. And to add on to what you said, Harry, I think Calderwood has real vulnerability if you go to her body early and often. And the way I'm imagining this fight panning out is the same as when Jessica Eye fought Viviane Araújo recently. In the first round, she loses, and she's against someone that is a bit faster and a bit better in the early going. But I think over the course of the fight, with a combination of bodywork, but also the other thing of, I feel like Joanne Calderwood, I've not seen a great deal of evidence of a takedown defense really developing as fights go on. I feel like she seems like she's quite easy to take down. I could imagine Jessica Eye stealing rounds later on with takedowns in that way. So,
but takedowns don't score though.
With takedowns and control, of course. But,
it's about
but
damage.
I think, well, either way, you get the takedown, you stay on top and you damage. But I think that Jessica Eye I think that's how the fight's going to pan out. It's hard because, like you say, they're both quite inconsistent, but I can really see Jessica Eye sort of getting those takedowns and also doing well to the body and taking a unanimous decision.
I do think that's definitely a viable route to victory. Don't get me wrong. We saw, I think the wins that make me feel like that could be apparent is Caitlin Chookagian, right? Long fighter, likes to on the outside, likes to throw those kickboxing combinations. Joanne Calderwood, not too dissimilar from that, right? Jessica Eye picks up a split decision win. Jessica Rose Clark, quick, decent kickboxing. Again, she beats Jessica Rose Clark. Do you know what I mean? So that's definitely an option. I think the difference is that Joanne Calderwood has a really nice front teeth, right? Landed it a few times on Jennifer Maia, landed it loads on Andrea Lee. Where Jessica Eye sits, and she sits into her knees, sits into the balls of her feet to land those hard shots and probably to set up her takedowns. She's got too much weight to get out of the way quickly. And I think if Jojo manages to land a couple of them, whether they're to the body, the head, whatever, like they're really good offensive weapons. And we could see whatever. But we'll move to picks. Sean?
Yeah, so I'm going with Jessica Eye by unanimous decision.
All right. Jack? The intelligent pick, please.
Calderwood by unanimous decision, please.
All right. As Jack is always the intelligent one, I agree with Jack. I will go Joanne Calderwood, unanimous decision. So we'll move on to Marina Rodriguez versus Amanda Ribas. Who's got that fight? Sean has that fight. Oh my God, misogynist Sean's got that fight. Go on then, Sean.
Mate, you've got to stop calling me misogynist, Sean. It's simply not true.
It's because you hate female MMA.
No. I was explaining that I hate low-level, shallow divisions. I don't like heavyweight either. And, the more head and arm throws there are, the more I will hate, the division as a whole. It's just the way that it works. But I actually think this is a really good fight.
It's a banger.
Yeah, I think it's really good. I think that there's a pretty clear winner for me.
Yeah.
But I think that Marina still has certain things in her style to make it interesting in the early going. I can imagine it early developing the same way as when Marina fought... who was it now? To be fair, this could apply to any Marina Rodriguez fight. In the early going, she closed the distance. She got to that plum clinch. And she's landing like really nice damaging knees and elbows. I think that Amanda Ribas is just way too well-rounded. I actually think that she's the new wave of female MMA fighters coming through who are going to use less head and arm throws, even though she used one in the last fight. But I'm putting that down to she was fighting down a level, okay? I'm going back to the Mackenzie Dern fight where she's hitting that amazing Uchimata and, outstriking her for basically the whole fight. So I'm leaning pretty heavily with Amanda here. I think if Marina can get taken down by Carla Esparza, even though I stand by the fact Carla Esparza is the Brian Barberina of that division. She just upsets like prospect after prospect. But
why do we invite you on this podcast?
It's so true. It's so true.
You hate Sean Shirk and you hate Brian Barberina.
No, that was not what that was about. I've used both of their names to compliment the fighters. What a great compliment it is to be compared to Sean Shirk. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I think that Amanda Ribas is probably going to run away with this one, because she's very good at dictating the pace, and I can't see her getting trapped up in that clinch.
Jack, could you do two things for me? If you could give your thoughts on the fight, but if you could also pronounce Amanda Ribas' name correctly, that would be phenomenal.
Was Sean saying Ribas? I didn't pick up on that.
He was, of course.
Yeah, it's because it wasn't happening.
Come on, Sean. But this is a banger, potential sleeper for fight of the night for me. I like that Marina Rodriguez is a bit of a nutter. I like that she has a crazy output and tries to throw elbows pretty much from everywhere. Most of her last two fights have been really, really close, and I think even if we drag it back to the Randa Marcos fight there as well, her output's great. She's got a very varied striking approach on the feet. She's game. Where it seems to be falling apart for her is the takedown defense, right? And I think Amanda Ribas' grappling is, look, I do agree with Sean's point. I think she's kind of the new wave. She is very well rounded, but her grappling is definitely her strength. She's got that judo background, and I think she will probably be able to drag the fight into the position she's comfortable. And I think once she gets on top, she's going to have a significant advantage. So I'm also leaning quite strongly towards Amanda Ribas. Yeah,
I don't think I have anything to add, frankly. I think you've summed it up really well. I think Ribas is the clear favourite here. And I agree with your points that Marina Rodriguez is an all-action fighter. I don't think this is sleeper for Fight of the Night. I think Fight of the Night is so easy to pick on this card. But I like the fight anyway. We'll move to picks. I'm taking Ribas via unanimous decision. Jack?
I'm going to take Ribas via submission in the third round.
But what submission?
Armbar.
Armbar, wow, okay. Sean?
I'm going to go with a rear naked choke in round 2 for Ribas, Amanda Ribas.
I'm so proud of you.
Nice.
You don't even understand. So we'll move on to Brad Tavares versus Shoeface. Jack?
Decent fight here in the middle of the pack of middleweight, right?
I really like this, actually.
Potentially a loser leaves town match as well. Both are coming in on 2-fight losing streaks. Brad Tavares has been around for ages. He was on, I can't remember what season, probably within the first kind of 10 to 15 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter.
He was Ultimate Fighter season 11.
Wow, that is ancient. And he's been around for at least a decade, kind of in that middle of the pack of the middleweight division. Just before his recent 2 losses, he seemed to be coming into his own a little bit, potentially moving towards kind of contender status. And obviously that was abruptly halted thanks to Mr. Adesanya and Mr. Shabazian. Shoeface, or Antonio Carlos Jr., pretty much a throwback to some of the original kind of Brazilians we used to see in the UFC back in the day. Mm-hmm. Exclusively a grappler. Has really shown us very little on the feet, and that doesn't seem to be changing on a fight by fight basis. He has been able to transform and modify his style of grappling very well for MMA. He grapples very efficiently, but again, he finds himself on a 2-fight losing streak thanks to losses from Ian Heinisch, who is probably like his stylistic kryptonite. Just a guy who's very excellent cardio and very difficult to take down. And then more recently, he had the close decision loss to Uriah Hall. Basically, all of Antonio Carlos Jr.'s fights come down to 2 things. One, is he going to gas, which we've seen be his undoing in several fights prior. Secondly, is he going to be able to land the takedowns? Tavares, whilst kind of fairly deep into his MMA career and potentially starting to weather a little bit on the feet, hasn't shown any signs that his takedown defense is faltering at all. It's actually always been fairly solid and one of the stronger parts of his game. I think if you combine that with his steady output and a decent gas tank, I think I'm starting to lean towards Brad Tavares a little bit.
I agree. And here's the comparison for you, Sean. Shoeface like a shit Damian Maia.
He is. He's a Poundland Damian Maia.
There you go. That's a fucking comparison for you. I agree. I actually think this is quite a close fight. It's a close fight because both guys, as you say, are middling guys. They're both coming off 2 losses. Confidence isn't going to be at the all-time high. Neither of them are riding so far. We both know, I say both, we all know, if this goes to the ground, we know where the advantage lies, right? It's really heavily in Shoeface's favour. But throughout his whole career, frankly, I can't remember the last time that I saw Brad Tavares spend a long period of time being controlled on the ground. I really can't remember. So we know that his takedown defense is good. I can't imagine him getting knocked out anytime soon by Shoeface. But yeah, I don't know. I think this is a close enough fight. Sean?
Yeah, I don't have a great deal to add. I think it's pretty close. I'm just not really feeling this one. I don't really agree. I don't think it's a good matchup. I think that this is going to play out pretty similar to Shoeface versus Marvin Vettori. I think there's going to be long periods of time where Shoeface is getting close to takedowns, but he's not quite getting there. And then it's going to be something like a pretty controversial or very close split decision at the end. But yeah.
Well, fuck it. Let's move on then. What's your pick?
I think that Brad Tavares is going to be able to stop the takedowns enough and do enough on the feet. So I reckon he's going to win a split decision.
I agree with you, but unanimous decision. Jack?
Same for me as well. I'm going Tavares by decision.
Oh, I fucking hate when we do this. I absolutely hate it.
Makes me sick.
Yeah, Sean's the worst for this. So we'll move on to the actual fight of the night, which is Arman. Jesus.
Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan.
Yeah. Tsarukyan versus Nasrat
for ages. Yeah. So I've been wanting everyone to hear me pronounce the name the right way. It's a big moment.
Arman Tsarukyan versus Nasrat Haqparast. Sean, take us away.
Oh, this is such a good fight.
This is
a complete
unbelievable.
Of Brad Tavares versus Shoeface. Wow, where do you even start with this one? So first of all, with Nasrat, I've been keeping an eye on Nasrat for quite a while, especially after he fought Mark Diakese. Yeah. I think something he does really well is that he puts a lot of pressure on people, but he does it being very light on his feet. So he's not just keeping himself in the pocket, a la someone like Justin Gaethje. He's in and out, but he's still exhausting the guys that he's fighting against. Like if you see some of these guys, even though most of his fights go to a decision, most of the time the guys at the end of the fight, he's completely battered. He's really not a guy that plays it safe. He really does damage people over the distance, and you can absolutely see where the sort of Kelvin Gastelum comparison sort of comes from. He also looks extremely like Kelvin Gastelum.
So you're calling him fat now as well? This is not a good podcast.
I'm just a terrible person, Harry. Okay, and the podcast needs to get used to that. But yeah, on the other side though, I think even though Nasrat's going to go in with a big speed advantage, I would think that Arman Tsarukyan is, I think his wrestling and his grappling overall is just such a massive X factor, and probably will be in most of the matchups that I put him in, that I'm trying to break down for him, because I don't think that Nasrat is going to be able to keep the fight where he wants it for very long at all. I think Arman doesn't really fit into any sort of standard wrestling archetype. Like he's not really a Dagestani sort of upper body clinch guy, but he also goes for like Kimura sweeps and loads of mad scrambles and stuff like that. The main thing is he's unbelievably strong. If you go back and watch the Davi Ramos fight, he shoots in on Davi Ramos, of all people, and from his knees just picks him up and finishes a double leg. Like that's absolutely insane, that ability to just put someone to their back. And I think even though Nasrat's shown some good defensive wrestling against Alex Munoz in his last fight, and back in the day, he struggled a little bit with Marcin held. But I still think, and maybe I am once again jumped onto a hype train and I'm completely lost on the hype train right now. But I think that Tsarukyan is a much bigger wrestling threat than both of those guys. So even though I think Nasrat's great, and I imagine on the feet he's going to have success pretty early, I think the wrestling of Tsarukyan is going to be pretty difficult to get past in this one.
Okay, so you did so well with Tsarukyan's name, but who is Davi Ramos? Who's that?
Davi Ramos. He's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner. He fights in the lightweight.
So, Jack, what do you think before I weigh in?
Unfortunately, I'm kind of thinking along the same lines as Sean here. I think that, I was hoping that everyone had kind of clocked on and seen how good Tsarukyan's wrestling is. It's been exceptional, and I think we saw that in the debut against Islam Makhachev, especially his anti-wrestling as well. He really, really pushed the scrambles in that. Haqparast did an excellent job against Alex Munoz, defending the takedown, who's also a very accomplished wrestler. I think the difference between someone like Alex Munoz and someone like Arman Tsarukyan is I think Tsarukyan's is able to blend his striking with his wrestling a lot better. He's got much better kind of more advanced setups for the takedowns, whereas Alex Munoz at this point is still doesn't really have much to offer on the feet, and his wrestling was a little bit more predictable. If Haqparast is able to keep this vertical, I think he probably would run away with it. I do favour his boxing technique, but like Sean, Tsarukyan's wrestling is a monster, and I think that's going to be the story of the fight.
Well, I think what we should also add is Tsarukyan has spent a lot of time recently with Edwin Najmi.
I did see that
for his grappling training, right? Now that is going to be very interesting to see whether we see some interesting stuff, some interesting sort of jiu-jitsu oriented grappling as well, rather than, just straight out and out wrestling and control. But look, I think one thing that we must think about here is Haqparast is training at TriStar, right? Under Firas Zahabi. He spent a good amount of time with Firas now. Firas is obviously a master game planner. Really, really good guys in his corner. And Firas will also have the blueprint after Olivier Aubameyang lost to Arman Tsarukyan. So we may see something from Haqparast that we're not used to seeing. We know that both guys have got crazy cardio, and then we know that one guy is a phenomenal grappler and the other is a really, really good striker. I think, look, if you can beat Mark Diakese in a fight that's predominantly on the feet, you're a fucking good striker. There is no two ways about it, right? So, yeah, I think this is a really, really good fight. I unfortunately lean the same way as you do, but I don't think Haqparast is going to make this simple for Tsarukyan. I think Tsarukyan's really in for a fight here. But I will go Tsarukyan via unanimous decision. Jack?
Same for me.
Sean?
Just for the sake of someone picking something different, I'm going to go with Tsarukyan round 2 rear naked choke, and I think it'd be fairly one-sided up until that point.
Interesting. Okay.
Very interesting.
You hate Nasrat Haqparast. Got it. I will let him know. Actually, it's funny.
Don't do that. No, first of all, don't let him know.
I will let him know.
Because I don't, and he'll batter me.
I was going to training once at TriStar, and when I was just sat on the metro, and this dude walked on with this massive sheepskin coat. I was like, I swear I know that guy. And it wasn't until we both got out at the same stop for TriStar I realized it was Nasrat Haqparast. So yeah, we're like basically friends now. So
you basically stalked Nasrat on the train. That was the story.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
You're right. You're great.
Essentially, we're basically friends, so I can tell him that you're a scumbag and he can do
that. Don't, please. I take back everything I've said.
So we will move on to Ottoman Azaitar versus Matt Frevola. And I think this is actually a low-key banger as well, to be honest.
Yes, another sleeper.
It is another sleeper. This card is actually fucking brilliant, to be honest with you. But yeah, Jack,
it is.
This fight will be really fun. In Matt Frevola, we have a small, stocky, aggressive ginger man, which is always a terrifying combination. With good wrestling as well. And then with Azaitar, he's still a little bit of an unknown just because we haven't really seen him go up against too higher level of competition. But from what we have seen, a lot of power, very dangerous right hand, good counter punching, and some decent takedown defense as well. My initial thoughts are leaning me towards Frevola, but not because of the stylistic matchup, more because I have questions around the opponents that Azaitar's fought. He's never really fought a particularly decent grappler. I think his management team have done an excellent job of finding him strikers predominantly. I think Frevola is going to play, his UFC career is just going to be him playing spoiler. We've already seen it with the two prospects, Jarlin Turner and Luis Pena, where he was able to outpace them, outgrind them, and land those takedowns. I have concerns about his striking defense. He was obviously lit up and whacked fairly quickly by Polo Reyes a couple of years ago, but I think you can clearly see it in his fights that he's learned since then. He's not as wild as he once was. He's learned to contain it and channel it. And it's a little bit more of a hedge just based on Azaitar's lack of experience, but I'm leaning towards Frevola.
I think you're a fucking scumbag.
We know that, though.
I mean,
we all are on this podcast.
It's true. We should fucking change this.
Good people.
Let's
just talk about fights.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so fucking true. We should change the name of this from the Balance Breakdown to the Three Scumbags and just be hugging.
The Three Scumbags. No.
Yeah.
I
think Lineker would approve
that title.
I think Lineker would.
Oh
approve.
yeah.
As long as he approves, then we'll do it. I agree in some fashion. I think that Teemu Packalén at this point, I mean, just a dreadful, dreadful knockout against Mark Diakese, right? Just one of the worst knockouts probably in UFC history, just for the way that his body reacted when Mark hit him with that shot. I was also there live for that, and that was absolutely disgusting. And then he takes almost 2.5 years off, and he comes back and gets absolutely whacked by Azaitar straight away.
Rest in peace, Teemu Packalén, wherever you are.
You know what that is? That's a GTA wasted sign, like immediately.
Yeah, he got wasted, bless him.
But Karma Worthy, I rate Karma Worthy. I think he's a good fighter. I feel like this could be a bit back and forth, but Azaitar feels like the kind of fighter to me that will find a right hand from absolutely anywhere. And he could be losing the fight. He could be, it could be, he could be the Paul Craig of the lightweights, where he's losing 4 minutes, 59 seconds of every single round. Then he pulls out a right hand and blams the guy out of nowhere. And I think that's going to happen against Matt Frevola. But Sean, go on. Tell me that I'm right.
Yeah, I agree with Jack. Jack made some great points
such a prick.
Thank you.
But I do agree with everything Jack said. I probably just disagree with the pick. But, you know, kind of based on watching the same fights, I think that Frevola is really exciting. I like the way that if he has the choice between slamming someone from like sky high and getting an energy efficient takedown, he'll just suplex them because, you know, that's the type of guy that he is. And I think that I can see a fight panning out the same way it did when he fought Pena. I could imagine him wrestling, but I think just because of the Polo Reyes fight, I think that Ottoman is probably going to get a finish here.
Yes, that's my fucking boy, bringing it home. So I will take Ottoman Azaitar second round knockout. Jack?
I'm being stubborn, although you made great points. I'm taking Frevola by unanimous decision.
And El Shawnarino?
I'm sticking with Ottoman. He beat Karma Worthy, which was another hype train I was completely on. I was going to get a Death Star t-shirt and everything. Bring on the Death Star. Probably the best post-fight moment ever. But God. I'm now on Ottoman's hype train. And I think if it gets out of the first round, he'll probably lose. So first round KO for Ottoman.
Right.
By the way, I really hope Jackie is making notes of these picks because that stopped a long time ago for me.
Yeah, I wasn't going to mention it, but I saw you just rapidly pull out your notebook trying to scrabble through what you have. To
memorize the last 8 picks.
You're literally a useless piece of shit, mate. I'm not going to lie to you. We'll rapidly move on to Jack's favourite fighter in MMA, full stop.
Oh,
and
yes.
That is Zhalgas Zhumagulov. So we had the Eastern European scumbag report, right, on Zhalgas. And to be honest, I thought in his first fight, he did all right. It wasn't
He did really well.
I mean, he lost.
The funniest thing was, the most ironic thing was me making jokes about him getting gifted decisions. And he put in Rowley and Piper probably got gifted a decision against him in his debut.
I don't know. I watched that fight back.
You thought Piper won?
Piper won the first 2 rounds, and I think Zhalgas won the 3rd round. Piper gassed hard in the 3rd round, but Piper was touching Zhalgas a lot in the 1st round, and I thought he did enough in the 2nd round to win it as well. But yeah, Zhalgas definitely won that 3rd round. My boy, Amir Albazi, training at London Shoe Fighters.
Yes. Give me the insights. Give us the lowdown.
Okay, so...
Do you follow him on the train home, Harry?
He follows me on the train home, actually.
Oh,
that's
okay.
what it's like.
That's cute.
But no, so
Nice.
I think that this... I feel like, frankly, this could be a little bit of a shoe-in for Albazi, to be honest. I think, obviously, he impressed in his first fight against Malcolm Gordon. It was not close, really. Gordon landed a few jabs. Albazi did really well in his striking, really crisp footwork, really nice jabs, really nice counter hooks. Eventually gets his takedown, passes with some lovely work into mount, finds a triangle, it's done. Right, beautiful. Though what was a bit strange is either he has some serious squeeze, because that triangle wasn't even on. Like, the arm wasn't across the body. He didn't have to hook anything. He just squeezed and the guy tapped. If that's a squeeze, fair enough. I'm being honest. I've watched a fair bit of Malcolm Gordon, and I think he's one of those people, when he finds himself in a bad position, he tends to exit a little bit early sometimes. Right, but let's just have a quick look at the last couple of fights that Amir's had in his record. Right, Jose Shorty Torres, we know, is no joke. UFC alumni. They had a fight in Brave, and he lost at a close decision. Just to point out, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I will. Amir cuts next to no weight to make weight. He walks around extremely light for an MMA fighter, right? Whereas Jose Shorty Torres has spoken a lot about how hard his weight cuts are. He's cutting 30, 35 pounds. Amir cuts nothing like that, right? So he loses the unanimous decision. For people that don't know, Ryan Curtis is a really good prospect out of Ireland, coached under Owen Roddy, really, really good prospect. And Amir managed to get the key lock against him within the first round. But doing my research, I think what we're looking at here is Amir is definitely a better striker. However, his actual prowess is grappling. He's a Swedish national champion, multiple-time national champion. He's competed across the circuit in grappling and done really, really well. So I think what we're looking at here is if he doesn't want to engage in the grappling, he could definitely do that against Zhalgas. If he wants to take Zhalgas down, Zhalgas is very difficult to take down. We saw that against Piper. However, the striking really, really favours Amir. Sean, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. Right. So how do I put this? I feel like Zhalgas is a fighter where if you took Yoel Romero's mind and put it inside a small Russian man, you would have Zhalgas. And what I mean by that is, I agree with everything you both said. I think that Amir should be able to take this one. But Zhalgas is so good at playing the ref. And he's so good in those little moments when, he gets hit in the thigh. It was a low shot and he takes 5 minutes to rest. And all of a sudden he's caught, That's what I mean by the Yoel Romero mind. Like, I really do think there's a big part. And I think that was a massive part of the Piper fight. So my prediction for this one is that Zhalgas essentially wins a decision that it looks like he's losing by manipulating the ref and everyone sort of surrounding the cage. I think he has that sort of mystical Yoel Romero power mentally.
Right. So as always, that's just a wonderful, insightful, detailed,
thanks.
Well thought out.
Thanks, Harry.
Breakdown. Jack, do you want to give me some actual thoughts?
To be honest, I don't think it can get any better than that. I think ideally I would like to see Zhalgas lose again. Although I do enjoy a good consistent cheater. But I think ultimately I think Albazi's well-roundedness is what will be the difference here. I think he can lean on his takedowns to steal some rounds, especially as Zhalgas looks to up the output. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be really competitive. I expect it to be close, maybe 2 rounds to one guy. But I'm leaning. The dog. I thought the dog was kicking off, and I didn't want him yapping and yawning in the background.
It's fine. Don't worry. Yes, you were saying that Albazi's well-roundedness.
Yeah, Is that so? What did any of mine come through, or do you want me to just completely reset that segment?
Just say it again.
Okay, we'll write that one off. I agree with you guys. I think Albazi's well-roundedness is what's going to be the difference here. I think he can probably match Zhalgas' output on the feet for certain periods, but there's going to be times where he's going to need to blend in a takedown or two, and I think he's got that within his arsenal. And I favour him to pick up 2 of the 3 rounds here.
Interesting. Well, is your pick Albazi unanimous decision? I'm
going to take Albazi by decision, yes.
Sean?
I'm going with Albazi by second round submission because I don't think it's actually possible to win a decision against Zhalgas.
So I think that Amir will find a rear naked choke within 3 rounds. I think the 3rd round. All right. We will move on as I've watched Sean not input any picks. We'll move on to a bit of a strange fight. But Jack, do you want to take us away with Khalil Rountree Jr. versus Marcin Prachnio?
It's a strange fight in that I don't know how Marcin Prachnio is still employed by the UFC. I mean, right. Unless he's obviously pissed on someone's strawberries and they just keep wanting to watch him get slapped. Yeah, I don't. There's not really a whole lot to say about this one. I don't think Prachnio is UFC caliber, and I know UFC caliber has been, or like the UFC standard has been watered down significantly over the years. But yeah, he really isn't particularly skillful.
That's so rude. The fighters that he's fought and lost to are just some of the absolute best.
Sam Alvey.
What do you want me to say?
Case in point.
Exactly,
guys. I think I'm gonna have to leave you here if you're really defending Sam Alvey like that.
Magomed Ankalaev. Come on.
Fair point. But
Sam Alvey. Sorry.
This is just set up to get Khalil Rountree back on track. He is incredibly inconsistent and frustrating because obviously there's a lot of he's quite athletic. He's shown a lot of power and there is definitely some potential there. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem he's been able to realise it. But yeah, I think this is a pretty soft win to get him back on track. I would be immensely shocked at any other outcome other than Khalil Rountree handed Marcin Prachnio his 4th consecutive knockout loss in the 1st round.
Smiling Sean Alvey.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jack said, apart from, him bashing, smiling Sam like that.
I can't believe it, frankly.
I mean, look, Marcin
I will
was
always
just
throw him under the bus.
That he was in there with a man with just the amazing fight IQ to just do the same thing every fight, which is run backwards towards the fence and knock you out with a right hook. And, who can blame him for that? Conor McGregor has his left hand. Sam Alvey has his fading back right hook. It's
what? I couldn't actually agree with you anymore. I think, at the end of it, at the end of the day, right, at the end of Sam's career, we're going to put 2 guys on Mount Rushmore for MMA. Conor McGregor will be there, and right next to him will be
smiling Sam
Alvey, throwing that beautiful right hook.
I thought we'd hit rock bottom when Sean compared Paul Craig and Ottoman Azaitar. But I think Sam Alvey...
No, that was Harry.
That was me.
Oh, was that Harry?
I compared Zhalgas to Yo Romero's mind.
That's pretty special.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm just saying, look, Jack, you're just salty because Sam Alvey can run a 5K backwards quicker than you can run it forwards.
Probably true. Unfortunately true.
He's incredibly good at moving backwards.
He's insane, mate.
It's unbelievable. It's like watching a fight in rewind. It's mesmerizing.
That doesn't make any sense. But okay. Okay. Jesus Christ, this is fucking derailing so fast.
Harry, you're supposed to keep the podcast on track. What are you doing?
I just love smiling Sam Alvey.
Ask us for the picks. For the picks.
All right, I'll ask you for the picks. Jack, what's your pick?
Khalil Rountree by knockout in round 1.
Fine. I'm also going via certified whacking in any fashion.
Yeah.
In round 1. Smiling Sean?
Marcin's going to get his career back on track.
Oh, Jesus. It's entirely we've lost him. We've lost him.
His Polish allegiance is too strong.
Yeah.
That's true.
Uncle Jan's got
in a favour.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think this is... I don't know why this fight was made. But I think, Khalil, round 1, with whatever he wants. Yeah.
Great. We will move on to Andrew Sanchez versus Makhmud Muradov. Jack?
Oh, this is This is a bit of a cracker, this one, especially if Andrew Sanchez has turned the corner, which perhaps it appears.
Certainly fucking looks like it, doesn't it?
Yeah, that I'm still undecided as if that was the kind of the perfect opponent for him, because I do think in some ways Wellington Turman is like a good stylistic matchup at least. But yeah, that was easily a career best performance. And Makhmud, I'm going to butcher this name, Makhmud Muradov. There we go. Can't lose my reputation as the Eastern European reporter. Is another exciting prospect. He's famously managed by Floyd Mayweather's team. I think he's the only MMA fighter on their roster as well. But he's looked a lot of fun so far. Very, very high output striker. Bit of a nutter as well, which is always welcomed. And it's going to be an interesting clash of styles. The big question mark for me in this fight is going to be Andrew Sanchez's gas tank, which has been notoriously suspect over the years. Thinking back to bad moments against Ryan James and Anthony Smith late, and also losing. He's got a bit notorious for dropping third rounds. For me, it's going to answer a lot of questions around Makhmud Muradov's grappling as well. I think he was able to nullify Trevor Smith fairly easily, but then again, I do think Trevor Smith is a little bit one note, at least with his setups. That's kind of the two kind of key points that I'm looking at in this fight. What are you guys thinking?
I actually agree. I think this is a banger. I think I was just so impressed by Andrew Sanchez in his last fight. Like, you know, he's 32. He's got all that wrestling background, and you just never ever seem to be able to blend the two together. And it seems, as you've already said, it seems like he turned the corner. Right? He's taken some weird losses. He's won some good fights. Blah blah blah. We are where we are. But I think if he has turned the corner, it'd be really interesting to see. Now, as you've already said, I wouldn't necessarily adopt a striking game plan for Muradov, right? I think you want to try and test that grappling. You want to try and see if you can tire him out, if you can put him on his back and see how he does there. But look, I mean, the beautiful stepping in, stepping out that we saw from Andrew, the sort of almost traditional karate style, low hands, these kinds of things. It was really nice, really, really nice. I just don't know, frankly. I just don't know what we're going to see. I think it solely depends on which Andrew Sanchez turns up. Smiling Sean, you want to round us out?
Yeah, I'm not feeling this one either. I kind of disagree with you guys on this one. I do like Andrew Sanchez. I've not been like massively impressed by some of the stuff from Makhmud. I think his gas tank is really, really suspect. And I think, like Jack was saying, I think the grappling from Andrew Sanchez is going to be, I think it's going to be a massive question going into this one, especially after knocking out one of the best names in MMA in Wellington Turman. He just sounds like he should be president for the United States or something. He needs to, be in some great job.
Roberts would have something to say about that.
That's true. That's true. But yeah, it's, I think the likelihood of this fight is I think Andrew Sanchez is either going to put on a really good grappling clinic or they're going to end up in a bit of a stalemate against the fence. And I do think that Makhmud's going to fade in the later going.
All right, give me a pick.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with Sanchez by unanimous decision. By split decision.
Right. I will take Andrew Sanchez by unanimous decision. Jack?
I am also taking Dirty Sanchez by unanimous decision.
Sick. Love it when that happens. We will revert back to misogynist Sean. You'll see that what's funny is now every card I'm trying to give Sean just the female fights to just tease this out of him. So eventually I'll admit it. So Smiling Sean, if you can
love it.
If you can break down Sarah McMann versus Juliana Pena, which is obviously fight of the night.
I actually do like this fight.
Oh God!
I know that you wanted me to just hate on it, but I think with both of these were both two fighters that I had quite high hopes for, and I do still kind of root for both of them. I have more doubts of Juliana Pena, but I've always thought that Sarah McMann, first of all, I think she has loads and loads of potential, and I think that
she's 40.
is she's 40.
What the fuck are you talking about? Loads of potential. She's 40.
Well, I didn't know what her age was.
Oh
I'm going on the fact that she's an Olympic silver medalist. And, you know, my overall thoughts of this fight is that I think it's taken a while for Sarah McMann to integrate that wrestling into, you know, a sort of more comprehensive MMA game. I think that, you know, that title shot ages ago against Ronda Rousey sort of, I think it was more just a gap in knowledge that sort of let her down in what potentially could have been a really interesting fight. And there's been some evidence of evolution. She's got some nice, you know, like front headlock submissions. I think her control on the ground has gotten a lot better as well. I think the biggest crux of this fight for me, though, is that Sarah McMann is someone that does very well early. And then later on in the fight, Harry, could you try and look less bored? It's very, very disrespectful. But yeah, I think Sarah McMann looks really good early. But if she's in a bad position or, you know, if the fight goes longer, I tend to lean away from her and think that she's got less of a chance of winning. Whereas Pena is very good at losing the fight early on. And then, you know, through a good ability to scramble sort of, you know, will win it over the course of the decision. So I think that's how it's going to pan out. I think that McMann will get early takedowns and then, yeah, Pena's going to sort of win over the course of the fight.
Jack, rescue me.
Oh, it's not a great one, is it? I am hoping for and praying and predicting for a quick Sarah McMann arm triangle. She has easily the best arms in women's MMA. And they look especially buff when she's squeezed on those arm triangles. So
I love how I've become the misogynist in this. How has this happened? Why don't we call the podcast the three? No, in fact,
no, let's not do that.
Let's forget what I was about to say.
That.
That's why you don't name podcasts.
Yeah. Let's steer this back on track. Yeah, I agree with Sean's analysis in that I think it's either McMann early on or probably Pena late. I don't recall a time I've seen Pena go up against this strong of a grappler. I think probably the closest we can get to it is maybe Kat Zingano. But even at that point, I think Kat was quite rusty. But yeah, I think I don't know how Julia's going to do on her back, and I think she's going to find herself there fairly often. And yeah, I like McMann to finish this one early, actually, within 2 rounds.
Look, I mean, if you look at Sarah McMann's record, it's clear she's got one thing. It's an arm triangle if she's going to finish fights, right? And that's not necessarily a criticism, because we know that if she gets to that position, it's done. Like it's pretty much done. But she either loses by submission or she wins by submission, right? And we know that Juliana Pena has some form of ground game, but I just can't see it. I think I just don't care. I just really don't care. That's my problem.
Harry, this is so disappointing.
I just don't
Why
care.
can't you just treat all fighters equally? You disgust me. You absolutely disgust me.
Oh my God. No, I think I was thrown off completely by this
fight. Look at
fight.
Harry's sweating now.
When you were like, you said to me, Sarah McMann's got so much potential that I just lost all bearing for this fight.
To be fair, I did miss out a pretty vital, detail in the fact that she's 40 years old. I've not been checking the age at all. But
she was competing in the 2004 Olympic Games, mate. And
that's insane.
We were in school when she was competing in the Olympic Games.
That's insane.
So, yeah, look, I mean, I will pick... Fuck.
The fans.
Yeah, fuck it. I'll...
You can default to the fans if you really want to make a pick.
You know what we should do?
Is this something we can do on the podcast every now and then? That would help.
From now,
you're allowed one pick per card.
Yeah, there you go. You're allowed one fans pick per card, and I am picking the fans. There you go.
Nice.
Sean?
Nice. I'm going with Sarah McMann is going to do incredibly well early, and then Juliana Pena is going to somehow sweep from underneath side control and probably win the last 2 rounds of the fight, because that's what happens in every Juliana Pena fight. Yeah, but I think it'll be good.
Fuck off, Jack.
I'm going Sarah McMann, legendary arm triangle in round 2.
Excellent. It's like when you used to play games and somebody would have a special attack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you absorb
Cheat codes.
you absorb enough damage and they just blam someone with an arm triangle, and that's what's going to happen. We'll move on to Jesus. I can only see this going one way, if I'm really honest. But the final fight on the card, which is Movsar Evloev versus Nick Lentz. Jack, as the Eastern European report, even though we all know who Movsar is at this point, if you can tell me a little bit about this fight.
I can tell you indeed. So this is Movsar was I think he was the bantamweight champion of M1 Global, and then he's joined the UFC and fought exclusively at featherweight. You will see his frame is a little bit short for the featherweight division, and I think he has. There's been some rumblings that he may drop down to bantam, but it doesn't appear that he's making that move yet. This is a very good stylistic matchup for him, and coincidentally, he's filling in for the gentleman who he just beat, Mike Grundy. Movsar is his base is in wrestling and grappling, and he's got a very, very suffocating top control game. We haven't seen it a ton in the UFC, especially last time out against Mike. But we did see him chain together some nice takedowns in his debut against Songwoo Choi as well. Nick Lentz is essentially just a slightly older and more decrepit version of Mike Grundy. He's a wrestler. He has a decent counter. He has a decent guillotine. His boxing is okay, but has always kind of been his weak point over the years. And at this point into his career, I would say he's, just off the top of my head, he's got to be at least a decade into his UFC career, 20 plus fights. He's starting to slow pretty dramatically as well. And
he's over a decade. 2009 was his UFC debut.
Oof, veteran. And then in his last fight, you could see the speed differential when he went up against Arnold Allen, and he just got completely jabbed up for 15 minutes. I think Movsar will probably look to implement a similar game plan. I think Lentz could make this a little bit more competitive if he can kind of force wrestling exchanges. But I think I favour Evloev and his beautiful footwork to kind of move in and out, keeping a fairly high output and score a clear-cut decision.
Yeah, I think this is about as one-sided a whacking as you're going to get from a unanimous decision from Movsar Evloev. Smiling Sean?
I'm not sure, this is my pick for fight of the night. And I'm not even joking, this isn't, I'm not messing around. I think this is going to be fight of the night.
A very serious question.
I could see it. Yeah, of course.
Have you snorted a line of coke before you came on this podcast?
I do before every podcast.
That makes so much sense. So much fucking sense.
Oh, sorry. I should have probably said that before. Yeah. There's a bit of context for my wild ramblings. But yeah, I think this is going to be, I could see this panning out like a Louis Smoker, Tim Elliott sort of matchup. And I'm obviously edging a lot with Movsar. I've been a pretty big fan of his since the Mike Grundy fight, but that's his last fight. So I've hardly been a dedicated fan. But
classic bandwagoning.
Yeah. There's a couple of things though that he does that are like really, really unique. Like especially his scrambles when other people have his back, like his Granby rolls. The sort of takedown he hit Mike Grundy with in that first round where he's in the front headlock himself and gets a takedown off of it. Like I've only seen that once off of Gary Tonin in some EBIs. He used to do that a lot. He used to take people down while he was in the front headlock himself. Another important detail with Movsar is that he is a sparring partner to PT Yan. Mm-hmm. There's some amazing stuff on YouTube of those two sparring, and you see more of the crazy scrambles that Movsar has to offer. I think the reason I don't think this is necessarily a shutout, even though I agree with Jack, if Movsar gets into his boxing rhythm, I think he will just tune up Nick Lentz for the whole night. But I think that Nick Lentz's guillotine is a big threat in this one for me, because even though Movsar's done well, I don't think he's been against someone who's not only a wrestler, but sort of uses his jiu-jitsu in his wrestling very well. And I do think that Nick Lentz has a really nice guillotine. He understands how to use it to transition as well as to finish people. And if you look at the first round, I still don't know how he got out of it. But when Mike Grundy did go to a DARS, it looked for a moment
that was
like
crazy.
That fight was over. And that was absolutely insane. How is that? How is that even possible? But yeah, so I think with Nick Lentz, for me, the big question mark is how Movsar sort of responds to someone who isn't just wrestling, because as you guys both know, things like a Granby roll, things like those front headlock things. They work well if you're against someone who's exclusively a wrestler. But when people are going for guillotines, putting hooks in and taking you back, that can be really difficult to work around. And I think that's some of the threats that Nick Lentz brings. So I'm hoping for some great grappling transitions in this one. Like I said, a Louis Smoker, Tim Elliott type of matchup. But Movsar, I may be more on his hype train after watching one fight than any, of the many other hype trains that I'm on. So yeah, I'm leaning with Movsar, but he needs to watch his neck. Well,
all this bullshit about guillotines. Nick Lentz's last guillotine was just over 3 years ago, and then before that, it was just over 9 years ago.
But Harry, no. But wait. That was why I said he understands how to use it in transition to sweep people as well, because he's won loads of fights where he's sweeping people with the guillotine. It's a massive part of his defensive wrestling game, even if he's not getting the finish, which I still think is a pretty important variable. But you can read off Tapology if you'd like.
What we're saying essentially is we're rounding this out and we're going all the way back to the first fight where you're expecting Nick Lentz to #jump the gilly.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's going to jump the gilly all night. Whether it works for him or not is the question, but I think it'll be a great fight.
All right. Well, those are our fights. Before we close out, Jack, can I get your...
Whoa. Are we doing the pick? Are we doing the pick for this last one, yeah? Or have I
just... I guess, to be honest, I thought we'd already fucking picked by the words that we were using. But go on. Jack, what's your pick?
Are we all in it for a Evloev decision? Or do we think there's a potential that he gets the finish?
No.
I think decision, yeah.
So those are our fights. I will repeat myself again. Jack, do you want to give us your pick for fight of the night?
My pick for fight of the night, I think it's going to be...
If you pick Sarah McMann and Julia Pena, I'm going to throw you out the bus.
I was going to do that just for the fun factor, but I'm going to save that for Sean because I'm sure that's going to be high on his list. I'm going to stick with Ottoman Azaitar versus Matt Frevola.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Smiling Sean, what you got?
I'm probably, for a second, I was going to go with Hooker and Chandler and completely change my mind on what was said, but I think I'm sticking with Nick Lentz versus Movsar. I've got high hopes for that fight.
So I think that this really does highlight the depth of this card and the amount of bangers that are on it, that we've all picked different fight of the night. I'm sticking with Arman, Tsarukyan and Nasrat Haqparast. I just can't see past it. I think it's going to be an absolute fucking banger. But yeah, look, I mean, overall thoughts on this card and any final closing thoughts, Jack?
No, I think it's the UFC's kind of loaded up the cards to kick off Fight Island again, and this is definitely
it's also a Conor McGregor card, right? So
yeah, this is definitely the crown jewel. It's going to be, as you touched on at the start of the podcast, it's going to be amazing to hear Conor fight in an arena with a very limited audience. I know Dana had said one of the reasons that he didn't want to, one of the reasons Conor hasn't fought yet is because he wasn't comfortable kind of sacrificing that lack of gate. But yeah, definitely a tip-top card. And my cheeky bet of the week is going to be, I've seen out there Dustin Poirier via submission at 12-1. Ooh. Now, if that's not worth a little ganders, call your nan, call your boys, get some change and stick that on. Remortgage your house. It's coming in.
Oh, we're going to get sued. We're going to get sued. We're definitely going to get sued.
Sean, final thoughts on the card?
No, I agree with what you said, Harry. I think this is one of those cards where when you are a bit of a casual like me, you read through it at first and you're like, nah, this isn't that great. But, under closer inspection, this is an amazing card. And I can't wait to see Zhalgas going back to work again, using his, I don't even know what to call it. It's probably best just to stop me from speaking, Harry.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just stop me.
I mean, I think there seems to be there's a really good promotional portion here from the UFC where you put somebody like Conor in a main event, you know that people are going to watch this card, right? So they've stacked the card with people to really highlight their stock a little bit more. I think the UFC are quite high on Dan Hooker, right? And I think that giving them, as we've already spoke about, giving them somebody like Michael Chandler to go there, co-main event in a Conor McGregor fight, everyone's going to watch that fight. he's probably going to bland Michael Chandler, and we are where we are, right? I think it's good to showcase the females. Amanda Ribas, Marina Rodriguez is an absolute banger. Proportionally, people are going to tune in for that main card too, right? If they're going to buy the pay-per-view, they're likely going to tune in for that main card. And then again, as we've already said, we're littered there with really, really good fights. It could be a standout performance for Amir Albazi. We could see some really good things for him, and I really hope we do see that. Ottoman, Azaitar, Matt Frevola, as we've already said. Think about that run of fights, right? We go from Khalil Rountree probably getting a certified whacking. We then go straight into Amir Albazi, who could have a great performance. Straight into Ottoman, Azaitar, could be fighting the night. Straight into Arman, Tsarukyan. And then we're rolling from there, right? It's main card territory. So I really think this card is an absolute banger, and for those of you in the UK, definitely go ahead and watch it. But as always, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, Jack. I'm pleased that you got safely back from Brazil, and you came back.
You're welcome.
With all your ribs, and you came back with a plethora of stories to tell us, probably off air. Smiling Sean, thank you for taking the notes that you didn't take. That was great. It's useful that we've got somebody that's competent at using their brain like Jack. But as always, I thank you both for your time, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.